と静香ちゃんにしてほしくないっぴ。僕もとっても悲しいっぴ。静香ちゃんもそんなんじゃ悲しいっぴ。こんなに長い間一人で大変なの知ってるっぴ。だから静香。
じゃあどうすればよかったの？知らない人みたいな顔で私のこと見てたお父さん、どうすればよかったの？
I'm literally gonna wait for you.
So with the final episode of Takopi's Original Sin finally airing, I think that it's pretty clear that this is going to be an Anime of the Year contender. But I think with anything that gets that sort of label, a lot of people would want to know, why does it deserve to be considered an Anime of the Year contender? And well, I'm going to explain to you what makes this anime so unique and so special that it's gonna stand out from all of the anime that are still gonna come out and the anime that have come out already. Because what this anime did was give us a very refreshing approach to perspective that left us going through so many emotions that by the end of it, you still don't necessarily feel fulfilled, but you have an understanding of what it tried to teach you. Because the premise of this anime is very simple. It's about an alien called Takopi who wants to make Shizuka happy. And the thing is, as we learn within the anime, we see that Shizuka is going through a lot of things in her life. She has an individual who's taking out her frustrations on her. She has a lot of misguided thoughts about what's happening in her household. Her father is not present. There's a bunch of things that you can see have been working on her nerves. And as such, within Takopi, we're given a different sort of approach to seeing what's happening to this little girl. Takopi is allowing us to perceive what's happening within her life, but in a very pure way. Because what this anime worked with, it tried to basically show you what Takopi was experiencing from a blank canvas. But technically speaking, we never had a blank canvas because we're all humans and we could see what was happening even before Takopi could see it. And as such, the simple task of making Shizuka happy was way more deeper than what Takopi understood. And we knew that, but it turns out that it was even more deeper than what we had assumed. Because within this anime, there's this simple sort of approach that you have to what Takopi is seeing. Most of the time you assume as the viewer that you know what's happening and you have an understanding of what's happening. But things start to change as the episodes start to go. Because the person who seems to be taking out the most frustration on Shizuka is a girl called Marina. And as we learn within her story, we see that she's going through a lot of things within her household that make her take out all of her frustrations on Shizuka. And as such, you see that Shizuka feels like she's backed into a corner. Her life is bad enough, but this girl just keeps piling on her. And as such, in the first episode, she makes a very extreme decision. But because Takopi was able to affect time, things go a little bit different than what they were intended to be. And this is the first problem, but we learn more about it later. Because what happens later is that Takopi is witnessing a situation in which he tried to change the future and allow Shizuka to not go through what she went through. And as such, the fate of both of these girls are affected. Because by the end of a certain episode, I don't want to spoil too much, but we see that Marina is not alive anymore because of what happened. And as such, something very dark happens, not only to Takopi, but also to Shizuka and also the viewers. Because once we see that Marina is gone, Shizuka is happy. She's happy because this person who's just been piling on her and making her life even more worse than what it is gone. And on Takopi's end, he's extremely confused as to what's going on because he realizes that he's taken someone's life, but it's resulted in the person that he's trying his hardest to help actually feeling like they've been helped. But another part that doesn't get discussed as much is what happens to you, because as you see the situation, you kind of go through a very interesting thinking process as the viewer. And this is the aspect of perspective that this anime plays with the first time. Because what happens is that as you're watching this anime and you see what happens, you eventually as a human decide to pick a side, because you've seen that Marina just seems like the villain, a person who's just bad. And when she eventually loses her life, you kind of don't really care too much about it because you understand what she put that girl through. And also based on that situation, you might even assume that Marina was going to take Shizuka's life there. So things kind of worked out the way they did, right? not really. Because what happens is that because of this sort of experience, Takopi just showed us, or this anime just showed us, how biased we are. Because technically, taking someone's life is not a good thing. It doesn't matter who was right or who was wrong. That's not correct. And you see Takopi literally think about that this entire time. But us as the viewers have decided that maybe it isn't that bad. And what we learn slowly within the anime is that it starts to spiral. Because later within the anime, we see that Shizuka is starting to morph a bit and start to make more manipulative moves towards attaining her own happiness, in which when we first watched the anime, we kind of wanted this girl to just have a happy life, but we started to understand the profoundness of what happened with Marina. That was the first step in Shizuka going down the wrong path, because she was now willing to do anything to attain what made her happy. And by the time it's too late and Shizuka has become this monster in a sense, we kind of regret the decision that we had accepted. And by the time you see who she's becoming, she's borderline more repulsive than what Marina was. But then the anime shifts the perspective again. It takes us through another part of the story, in which reveals a secret about Takopi, in that he's been here before, but actually he was with Marina. And when you see what's happened within her life, you start to understand what Marina is going through, and you start to build a level of sympathy, because within the story of Marina, Shizuka is the villain because of something that happens that, again, for both of these individuals and another in Azuma, it's beyond their control. But sometimes it seems like they're so intertwined that as such, someone has to be the villain and someone has to be the good guy. And by the end of that whole experience, where we see what Marina actually goes through, we start to perceive Shizuka as a villain. And as such, as a viewer, you have questions now where you have to really think about who you sided with, because on one side you justified what happened to Marina because she was a bad person, but then you saw that Shizuka has become a bad person because she's having things her way. So you really have to decide who actually deserves to be happy. And that is the part of this anime that becomes extremely dark and extremely profound, because as Takopi's trying to make decisions, he's doing the same thing that we're doing. And when you think about the profoundness of that question, it's extremely dark, because it seems like the happiness of the other is dependent on the other person going through bad times. So you have to make peace with the fact that someone has to suffer so that someone else can be happy. And as such, the whole concept of what happiness is takes such a dark turn. And that's where this anime just warps everything that you've watched. Because the whole concept of happiness is something that seems to be very pure, but based on something that is said later onwards within the final episode by Azuma, it's very difficult to decide who deserves true, pure happiness if you have an understanding that people can be both good and bad. And this applies to both of these characters, because what happens at some point is that we realize that Takopi is borderline playing God. In fact, he is playing God, because he has the ability to decide who becomes happy and who has a better life. In fact, he takes things so far that his mother tries to intervene and stop him, because he's not doing what he's intended to do, which is give happiness to everyone. He's now fixated on giving happiness to specifically one person, and as such, he's orchestrating their life. But also, he's not the only person, because we're doing the same thing. We chose a side. And that's the crazy thing about this anime. You sometimes feel like this omnipresent God or being that is watching over this story, choosing who to side with. And when things go well for that person that you like, you feel good. But there needs to be a very strong understanding of what happiness is. Because when it comes to our lives, if you think about some of the most happiest moments in your life, how often do you actually think about what happened to someone else because of your happiness? Because this is what this anime makes us question. Because if you think about some things that have happened to you, like for example winning a competition, did you ever think about what happened to the person who came second or third or fourth or last? Not really, because you were focused on what made you happy. Same thing as when you look for a job. When you get the job, it's an amazing feeling. But for that person who lost out on the job that you might not even be aware of in terms of what's going on with their life, that could be the end of their being or life. And even though it might seem dramatic, it's true. As we see within within life, some people have made decisions with their lives because things didn't work out the way that they wanted. And this anime shows you just how powerful that can be. And you start to realize that you and Takopi are doing something that is incredibly wrong. To see the person that you like be happy, we're starting to even overlook evil to the point that it becomes so uncomfortable that you wish that you have an opportunity to change things. And funny enough, this anime gives us an opportunity to affect time and go back in time. But later onwards, when we realize that you can't go back, when you can't fix the things that you've decided on, it makes the anime even more deeper because you have to live with the decisions that you've made. In terms of the final episode, some people might not be happy with what it ends with because it seems to be along the lines that you should talk about things, and if you express yourself hopefully, you can improve in a certain way even though the circumstances that you have are bad. Basically, don't let your circumstances affect you. Be yourself. But most people will look at that very negatively because it seems like a basic answer. It seems to be very simple. But at this point in the video, you should now understand that nothing is as simple as what it seems. The idea of happiness seemed like the most easiest concept to try and figure out. But we learned what really comes with happiness and sadness and all of the other things that happen within this anime. So for Takopi to give you a simple answer, or this anime to give you a simple answer, it's not really. Because what we see is that even though these characters are able to talk about their situations, their circumstances did not really change. The only difference that happened is that they were able to deal with their situations a bit better, but it didn't stop them. And this is something that you have to deal with and accept, because Takopi offered these characters and us an opportunity to constantly keep changing fate. But sometimes you have to accept fate and accept your circumstances, even if they're not what you want them to be. Because by this anime suggesting that people should talk about their issues, it's harder than that. We all know it. There's a lot of people who might want to express their issues but can't. There's some people who feel like they should express something but they can't. And the more you think about certain things, it's always in terms of life, the most simplest things to do to fix your life that are the most hardest to accomplish. It's always like that. And this anime shows you that even in the end, because in terms of the ending, it's not exactly what we wanted. It didn't end on a happy ending, but also it didn't end on the most darkest version that some people might have wanted. But truthfully, when it comes to life, most of the time it's like that. You're not gonna get the perfect ending, or sometimes you won't get the darkest of endings. Sometimes you're just stuck in the middle, and for a lot of people, that's an extremely uncomfortable place. And this is what this anime shows us. This is one of the reasons why I think this anime is so profound, because the truth is, with everything that I've told you about this anime, we're all going to have different conclusions and ideas about what this anime was teaching us and what this anime was showing us, mainly because of our own life experiences and what has happened to us. And this anime understands this. To see an anime like this have such a profound and strong effect in just 6 episodes is deep. But the fact that this anime at the end gives all of the power to you after witnessing other people live their lives is so deep, because by the end of the anime, whatever you've decided to do with what you've seen is up to you. And to see that this anime is borderline not only trusting the characters in the anime with deciding how to live their life, but you yourself, is extremely powerful and amazing writing under this one idea that it taught us something about life, but how we approached it is our own unique journey. And I hope that I explained to you as best as I could as to why this anime deserves so much love for what it did in the short amount of time that it actually was around. This anime, to me, fully deserves to be anime of the year. There's no question.